Welcome back. So it seems the Plumtree stories are quite popular with people, and who would have thought? I mean, I sitting here talking like I'm speaking to someone in a pub. Who would have thought that they'd get so many views and likes? Anyway, so I thought I'd continue on that theme um, and tell you a story about a really stupid thing that we did. This was probably 3, 4 weeks before I was actually sent to Plumtree. And it was like a thing of dread. I was like, oh my God, this is happening. Um, so it was myself and two mates, Sean Buckley and Robert Mann. We used to hang out together all the time. And it was on the weekend, it was a Saturday. And we had a method of escaping from our parents, and it was very simple actually. I would tell my parents that I was going to stay with Sean. Rob would say that he was coming to stay with me, and Sean would say that he was going to stay with Rob. And that way we were free, and we were able to move around Harare and do what the hell we wanted. So it was a Saturday night, and we decided that we were going to go and watch a movie. But obviously, we had no money to go into town to the movie house, no way of getting there. So we decided that we would go to the Night Star Drive-In, which was a drive-in theater on the Mutare Road. And it was frequented on the weekends by hundreds of people who would drive there and park their cars, grab some popcorn from the cafe, maybe a beer or a Coke, and watch the movies. There was 2 sessions every night. There would be the early film and then the later film. And it was our plan that we were going to go and chill out and watch a couple of movies. So we packed a rucksack with a sleeping bag, and I had a little Donkey Kong machine, which my parents had bought me in Johannesburg. It was a little handheld digital device, and it was my prized possession at the time. So, armed with a rucksack, a single sleeping bag, and a Donkey Kong machine, the three of us met somewhere in Highlands round about 4 o'clock and set about walking through the suburbs towards Masasa to the Night Star Drive-In. Once we got there, it was dusk. Dusk was falling. It was getting a bit dark. We skirted around the rusty old fence of the drive-in and went round the back, close to the railway line, and climbed under the fence as the cars were starting to arrive for the early film. Now, there was a bunch of tarmac mounds at the drive-in, and they all had poles in them with these old metal speakers. And in the day, what you would do is you would drive your car there, and you would park next to one of the poles, grab the speaker and hook it onto your door or onto your window, and then you would adjust the volume, and you could listen to the trailers, you could watch the films. People would go and get beers or cokes or snacks or burgers or whatever, and you'd sit in your car and enjoy the film, the drive-in theater. It was awesome. Of course, we were on foot, so we snuck in, and we found one of these tarmac mounds towards the rear of the drive-in. We laid out our sleeping bag, facing the screen, put the speaker down, got ourselves settled, and began to watch the movies. And it was awesome. I don't really remember the movie that was on, the early one, but it was great. I think we had a few bucks. We went and got a Coke or a cream soda or something from the cafe and came back and, enjoyed. And then, of course, the second movie came on. So we watched that, and it was great. And then, we had nowhere to go. So we decided, well, we might as well just stick around. So as the cars filed out, sort of 11 o'clock at night, we kind of just went to sleep. And that was it. We woke up around about 5:30 the next morning. It was warm. There was no problem. We weren't in any danger or anything like that. We were fine, bulletproof in those days. But we woke up feeling a little bit disillusioned with life. And I said to Rob and Sean, look, I'm really dreading going to Plumtree. I really don't want to go. And I wish we could do something, to avoid it. Sean came up and said, well, look, I would like to go live in South Africa with my dad. So, I'm also a little bit unhappy. And Rob said, well, whatever you guys decide, I'm up for it. So we came up with a plan. So what we would do is we would run away and we would go to Beira in Mozambique, hang around there for a bit, and then jump on a ship and go to England and become gardeners. Sounds like a brilliant plan. So we discussed it. We went through its merits and if it was a good idea or not. But at 15 years old and facing what we were facing, we decided this was a brilliant plan. We're going to go to Beira, jump on a ship, go to England. Sounds great. Okay, boys, so what are we going to do? So we're like, okay, well, we need to get moving. And the obvious choice was the train. Now, behind the Night Star Drive-In was the railway. And back in those days, the railways used to run pretty well. There was frequent trains going east to Mutare and then into Mozambique. So we decided that we would jump a train. And off we went. We climbed under the fence in the early morning, walked through the bush down to the railway line, and hung out there waiting for a train. Eventually, I think it was within half an hour, a goods train started chugging towards us slowly. And it was full of coal or something. I'm not too sure. I think it was coal because there was a lot of dust and it was very dirty. And it chugged past us, with this heavy noise and diesel electric and all of these wagons going past. But to the rear of the train was this guard cabin, guard cart, I think you'd call it. And it had these open doors on the side. And we immediately thought, okay, this is how we're going to jump on the train. We can't jump onto the coal wagons. We just jump in the guard wagon. So we ran along the side of the train, gripped on the side, and launched ourselves inside the guard wagon. And inside it was filthy. There was empty sacks full of coal dust, dust swirling around, and it was not a very pleasant environment. But also, what we found in there was a guard, and he was quite shocked to see 3 young white boys suddenly jump into his wagon and sort of look at him and say, oh, okay. He was like, who are you and what do you want? And we said, oh, sorry, but we're going to Mutare. Can we come along for the ride? I think he was a little bit shocked, but eventually we convinced him and he became agreeable, and we were allowed to sit in the corner and make our journey east towards the border and to Beira. However, this was a goods train and it was extremely slow. And the 80-kilometer journey to Marandera must have taken 2-3 hours. And by the time we got approaching Marandera, we realized that, look, if we continue with this train, it will probably be midnight or even the next day by the time we actually get to Mutare. So we thanked the guard and we said, listen, thanks very much, but we're out of here. We're going to find an alternative route. So by the time we jumped off the train just outside Marandera, we were covered in coal dust, but we were making progress. We were on our way. So we walked to the main road and we decided to hitchhike. We put our thumbs out. And soon enough, an old Rhodesian gentleman in a pale blue Peugeot 404 pulled up. And he opened the doors and we said, yeah, good morning, sir. We're going to Mutare and we're hitchhiking there. And he says, well, I'm going as well. So we said, well, can we come along? And he said, yeah, sure, you can. So we jumped in and off we went. So naturally, he was curious, There was these 3 young white boys covered in coal dust who wanted to go to Mutare, and he naturally started asking a few questions. So you boys, where are your parents? Who are you going to go see in Mutare? And how long are you going for? just a few questions. We imagined that he was probably, and rightfully so, a little bit suspicious. Anyway, we answered as best as we could, and he kind of nodded and looked at us like this and thought, yeah, okay, whatever. So the morning progressed. I think it was about a 2.5-hour drive from Marandera up Christmas Pass and down into the beautiful basin of Mutare. And by the time we got there, I think it was probably about 3 in the afternoon. It was a warm afternoon with that wonderful yellow glow in the avenues and suburbs of Mutare. So we had no plan. We were headed to Beira. We were going to jump a ship, but we were still, as far as we knew, only halfway and not even crossed into Mozambique. So we had a problem. Now, we looked around and we saw a natural a landmark in the distance, and this is a place called Cross Copy, which is basically like a hill or a mountain close to the suburbs of Mutare with a giant cross on the top. So this was a beacon for us, and we used it as a target, and we walked towards it through the suburbs of Mutare as the afternoon went on, and eventually we got to the foot of this hill, and we climbed up to the cross. And by the time we got up there, it was, I would say, almost dusk. And in the distance east, we could see the lights of Manica, which was in Mozambique. And we looked at it and we said, well, that's where we're going. So we might as well head off. It can't be that far, you know. And we're like, okay, you know, let's go. So, full of wisdom, which we had, obviously, we started walking down the hill over Cross Copy and trying to head east. But it very quickly got dark, and we found ourselves surrounded by some kind of jungle, and it was impenetrable, and we couldn't move at all. There was no ways. So we knew we had to hunker down and rest for the night. So we were by then a little bit concerned for our welfare. But anyway, we spread out the sleeping bag, lay down, and just rested. I think it was about 9 o'clock that night. We heard voices, and there were people moving around in the darkness, and we had no idea where. And I remember Sean whispering, Jesus, I hope they're not dissidents. And I was like, well, you know, I hope not also. Geez, you know, that would be a bit of a bummer. Anyway, we remained dead quiet, and the voices and the people obviously passed and went off. Dawn came the next day, and we found ourselves in this forest, and eventually we were able to see where we were and where we'd come from. And down the hill was a valley and various huts and open plains going down towards, obviously, the border and then on to Manica in Mozambique. So we decided, look, it's time to head off. So we hadn't eaten or anything, and we were in the middle of nowhere, and off we went. So we were walking through the bush, and eventually we came up to this fence, this rusty fence, and on the fence was this metal sign with a skull and crossbones on it, and the words Perigo Minas were written on the top. Basically, I think it's Portuguese for danger, mines. And we thought, oh, this is cool. And Sean said, this is a really cool souvenir. So he pried it off the fence, and we threw it in the rucksack. Basically, in our wisdom, we were probably walking through a minefield, but we were just young and dumb, and we didn't really pay much attention. Yeah, a bit crazy. So we made it through and got into a little bit flatter ground and open ground, and then we headed further down, and we found a stream with rock falls and little rock pools, and it was a perfect playground. So we lay on the rocks, we swam in the pools, and we jumped around on the rocks, climbed trees, had a bit of fun that morning before deciding we needed to build a shelter. We realized that getting to Beira was probably not going to happen, And, well, not on that day, but we needed a place to sleep. We didn't want to sleep in the forest again. So we went down to the railway, and we decided to grab some sticks and logs and grass, and we were going to build ourselves a hut. Unfortunately, our building skills were not so great, and what we did manage to erect quickly fell over, and we gave up on that idea pretty quick. By the end of the day, I would say it was probably about 3:30, we started to realize that we were hungry. So we looked back up the hill towards Crosskopje, and up there was an African hut, like a little, almost a little village, but a little homestead, a thatched roof round hut. So we decided, look, let's go up there and see if we can befriend someone and perhaps get some food. So we climbed up there. Sorry, I was disturbed there. One of my workers came to the door, and I had to go and attend to something. I'll get on with the story. So we went up to this hut, and it was abandoned. There was a couple of chickens scratching around, a goat in a pen, and we were like, well, there's no one here. What are we going to do? By then, the sun was going down, and we were starving, hungry. So we kind of just sat around, and we didn't know what to do with ourselves. Eventually, this old man came. He was an old black guy. I think he must have been in his 60s. He came walking up the hill slowly, and he had a grey beard and grey hair, and he didn't speak a word of English, and it was obvious that this was his homestead. Anyway, we kind of, a little bit of sign language, said to him, hello, how are you? And could we have something to eat? And he was quite agreeable, and I don't know what he must have thought, 3 filthy white boys arriving out of nowhere and just waiting for him at his house. It turned out that we found out that he actually worked for the railways through some kind of communication that we had done. But he was welcoming to us, and he took us in, and he made a meal of sadza and nyama, meat and milipap with vegetables, and I think it was goat meat, but by the time we ate it that night, he cooked it over an open fire. By the time we ate it, it was probably the best meal we'd ever had in our lives. We were starving. We didn't really know it. So it came time to go to sleep, and we kind of he motioned to us that we could put our sleeping bag down in his hut, and we did that, and we promptly fell asleep. I think we were exhausted by then, but we were on our adventure, and we didn't really, think too much about it. We were grateful that he had taken us in. The next morning, before dawn, he was awake, and he set off to go to Mutare, back to work, and we got out of the hut, and he locked it, and we went on with our day. There was nothing to do. We had decided that we were going to put off our journey to Beira for now, seeing as we had found this playground in the mountains with rivers and rock pools and loads of fun, lots of stuff to do. So this was all good. We went back down to the river and hung around the rocks, jumping around, swimming, whatnot. But come around lunchtime, we decided we were hungry again and we needed to get some food. Now, there was one option available to us, and that was to go up the railway track, back into Mutare, and find some food, which is exactly what we did. We walked down to the railway, took a right, and made our way back towards where we knew Mutare was. Just then a train came past, a goods train, and it was going quite fast, and we decided that we would jump the train and it would speed up our journey into Mutare. So we ran alongside this goods train, grabbed onto the metal bars on the side and leapt up and sort of piggybacked our way into Mutare. We jumped off before the main station and filtered our way into the bustling streets of the city of Mutare. Filthy, looking like street urchins. I don't know how we weren't noticed, but we made our way to a TM supermarket, went inside and found these square tins of bully beef. And we each stole one, stuck them in our underpants, made our way out of the supermarket into the alleyway. They had those screw openers, and we opened them and digging the meat out with our fingers, and we enjoyed a very pleasant luncheon. By then, Rob decided that, we've had a very decent lunch. What we need is some dessert. So he said that he would take care of that. He went back in the supermarket and emerged probably 5 minutes later with the front of his shorts bulging with ice creams. So we quickly ducked into the alleyway again and had about 2-3 ice creams each, which was very pleasant. And then we decided that it was time to head back to our accommodation in the mountains. We took the walk back down to the railway station and walked out of town, eventually got to the spot, walked up the hill to the old man's house where we relaxed for the rest of the afternoon. But it was during this afternoon that we had some kind of disagreement, and it was over the Donkey Kong machine. I can't remember what it was, but I think there was an argument that one of us had played longer than the other. It was a silly argument, but it was enough to get me riled up, and I said, listen, you guys, I've had enough. I'm going back into Mutare, and I'll see you whenever I see you. And they were like, oh, okay. So I left them with the Donkey Kong machine and the rucksack and the sleeping bag, and I headed down the hill and turned right and started walking back into Mutare. Well, by the time I got there, it was just after sunset, and I emerged from the station, the railway station, in a crowd of people, and there I was. I had no idea where I was going, what I was going to do. All I knew was that I had left my mates and I was going into town. Well, what I didn't see was there was a policeman, and he had spotted me, and he chased me, and he grabbed me by my wrist, and he said, You are Gordon Wallace, aren't you? So I said, yes, I am. So I was then marched through the town with this guy gripping my wrist like a vice and taken to the charge office on Main Street in Mutare, where I was delivered into the charge office. And there was a young white policewoman there, and she wasn't too pleased to see me. And she scolded me. She said, you have caused a lot of problems for us. Where have you been and where are your friends? And I said, well, I'm not telling you. I'm not telling you a word. This made her very angry, but I was steadfast. I wasn't gonna give my mates away. And eventually she said, are you hungry? And I said, yes, I am. So she sent someone off, or she went off herself, and she came back with a punnet of curry and rice, which was from a takeaway, obviously. And she said, well, there you go, there's some food for you. So I opened it and I said, well, how can I eat it? I don't have a fork or a spoon. So she scowled at me, and then she disappeared and came back with a spoon, and I proceeded to eat my dinner. By then it was dark. Now, being 15 years old, they couldn't put me in a jail cell, so I was told to sleep or rest on the bench in the charge office, where the police officers on duty could keep an eye on me. They didn't want me to run away. They suspected I might do that. What had happened was the old man who had taken us to Mutare in his Peugeot 404 had become suspicious about us. And after dropping us off, he had gone to the police station and said, listen, there was 3 boys I've just given a lift from Marandera to Mutare. They looked a bit dodgy. There was something up with them. Just let you know that they are here. They're in the area. So this is how the police were alerted to our presence. Now, God knows what our parents must have been thinking by then. I mean, they must have been beside themselves. But we were stupid and young. We didn't give a shit. Anyway, being knackered, I slept on this bench. I had no problem sleeping at all. And the next morning, a bunch of policemen came in a Land Rover and said, "Look, Gordon, Mr. Wallace, we are taking you to the police commissioner for Manicaland, and we want to warn you, do not give him any trouble. He will not suffer fools, and he is very angry with you." So I said, "Yeah, okay, whatever." So I was bundled into this Land Rover, and off we went through Mutare down to close where the Portuguese club is today. Still is there, the main police camp. Drove in through the boom, went through the leafy areas of the police camp to the commissioner's office. And once again, I was warned, don't be cheeky. Well, I was brought into this office, and there was this huge, huge black man, and he was sitting behind his desk. He had a head like a cannonball, and that early in the morning he was sweating, and he was none too pleased to see me. And he was also pretty angry that they had not found Rob and Sean. So I was told to sit down, and he glared at me and he said, "You have caused us a lot of problems. Where are your friends?" So I said, "Well, I'm not telling you." So at that, he just got even more angry. Then I realized that perhaps I could make a deal with this man. And I leant back in my chair, full of arrogance, and I said, "Look, if you get me some cigarettes, I'll tell you where they are." And, well, his head almost exploded. But he shouted out an order to one of the junior officers, and the guy ran off. And 5 minutes later, he came back with a box of 30 Madison and a lighter. So, with great ceremony, I sat there slowly unwrapping the box of 30 Madison. I opened it slowly like that. I lifted the foil. I ran my fingers over the cigarettes until I had chosen the one I wanted. I picked it out, studied it, put it in my mouth, lit it, and exhaled as I stared out the window. Unbelievable arrogance. By then, this guy was probably having a heart attack with rage. I realized the game was up, and I just said, "Look, they're over on the other side of Cross Copy. They're over there. We've been staying in a hut over there." Immediately, he barked out orders to his junior officers, and 2 trucks full of cops headed in that direction and commenced a sweep of the area. I'm talking maybe 30 officers over Cross Copy and down through the valleys, where they came across Rob and Sean, who were enjoying themselves in the rock pool, swimming and just having a great time. Well, they returned probably 2 hours later, and we all realized that the adventure was over. And, we weren't going to Byra, we weren't going to jump a ship, we weren't going to go to England to become gardeners. It was over. We'd been caught. And anyway, it was a nice reunion to say hi to the mates again. Hey, how's it? All good. The commissioner for Manicaland said, "Look, your parents are coming. But you boys are very dirty, so we want you to go and have a shower first." Now remember, we only had the clothes we were wearing, and a rucksack, and a sleeping bag, and a Donkey Kong machine. So we were filthy, absolutely filthy. So we were taken to this shower block in the police camp, and they put the water on for us and said, "Right, you boys, clean yourselves up." Well, we were rebels to the end, and we ran around there with our muddy hands, putting handprints on the walls. We jumped up on the shower pipe with our muddy feet and put footprints on the roof of this shower block in the police station. Absolute terrorways. But our joviality sort of came to an end when my father arrived with Rob's stepdad. And they arrived, having driven from Harare to come and collect us. And we thought, well, okay, this is when the consequences are going to start. And well, there was a quiet word with the commissioner, with our folks, and then we were released, and we got into the back of the car, and we drove the 3 hours back to Harare. I remember we went to Sean's place first, and his mother was standing in the doorway with her hands on her hips. And Sean got out the car and did the walk of shame into the house. And as he got to the door, his mum clipped him on the back of the head, and he disappeared into the darkness of the house. Then we went to Rob's house, and Rob and his stepdad got out, and that was that. And I drove home with my dad. And to be honest, I didn't get into much trouble, not as much as I expected. Basically, what happened was I was given food, and sort of everything was calm, and I was told to go to bed, and that was it. And that was the story of our adventure to Beira, our running away to Mozambique, supposedly, which didn't actually happen. This is all prior to me going to Plumtree School. These and other stories are in a book I wrote called The Plumtree Diaries, which has been recently revised and expanded. I'll put a link in the description below. You can check it out if you want. Also, I'll put a link to my fiction stuff down there. I actually ran away again on the way to Plumtree School, but that is a story for another day. I hope you enjoyed this one. Like, subscribe, share, or don't, and I'll see you in another one. Cheers for now.